Senator Murphy should be here in just a minute. Um, are you on a tight timeline, Senator? Well, why don't we give him 3 more minutes on my watch and then we'll. All right. We didn't need to give him 3 minutes.
This is close to 9, so I could never make it.
I think that you did well. I think you did well.
My kids dropped this.
All right. We'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 271 and ask the prime sponsor to introduce himself.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Pleasure to be here. For the record, Jeb Bradley from Senate District 3, introducing what I think is a very simple bill. It adds to our RSA that deals with elections a sentence that says any New Hampshire delegate so selected to a presidential primary for a convention must be seated and must have full voting rights. So without belaboring the point, given the difficulties, whatever you want to call it, with regard to the potential loss of first in the nation status for New Hampshire, this sentence would put it into New Hampshire law that any New Hampshire delegates so awarded by our first in the nation primary must be seated and must have full voting rights.
Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Senator, for introducing your bill. And let me go get, oh, the last time I looked, there was no one else that was signed up to talk, so let's see if anyone has snuck in here in the meantime. All right, is there anybody that neglected to sign in? Okay, we'll close the hearing, and just so that everybody knows that if I get a couple more people, that we do have to exact all the FN bills or get the chair of finance to waive them. He's probably not going to do that, but so I know that Senator Susie has a conflicting meeting, and she should be here, and then Senator Abbott should be here because he does have one of the bills that come later. So we will be in recess for 10 minutes. she's got to hit record first.
Yeah, not a problem. No,
Then
Tricia, you're all
then we're
good.
ready to go.
Are you geared back up from Aruba?
I just really don't know why I'm back.
Looked like a lovely vacation. Yes, you do, and you're very good at it. Thank you.
It's 9:15 by my clock, so we'll open the public hearing on Senate Bill 221 and ask the prime sponsor to introduce herself.
Good morning, Chair Gray and members of Election Law Municipal Affairs. My name is Sue Prentice. I am the state senator from District 5, representing 15 communities that span between a large part of Grafton County, part of Sullivan County, and one community in Merrimack County, and I am proud to represent them here in the state Senate. I am here today to introduce Senate Bill 221. This is enabling legislation that allows municipalities to adopt a property tax exemption for child care agencies. Now, I'm going to talk about this bill in general in a few minutes, but I just wanted to point out that there is an amendment I asked Tricia to pass around to section 1, and it's really just the first page, and I'll explain what the amendment covers after I provide my opening comments. This did come in over vacation, so I held it until we're back in action today. So I think, as we all know, the child care crisis is also a workforce crisis throughout our state. All solutions are welcome. The Upper Valley Business Alliance, an organization focused on promoting economic health, represents 470 businesses located throughout the Upper Valley and have heard loud and clear from their members that their employees are unable to find childcare. Therefore, they are unable to work, and in some cases, even unable to accept positions and move into the Upper Valley, and that's if they can even find a place to live. This is not just a Lebanon and an Upper Valley issue, this is a statewide issue. The Upper Valley Business Alliance's mission is to serve and advocate for our members, both large and small businesses, with local and state government, and to promote and seize opportunities to better the economic climate in our region. This is one of those opportunities that they have seized in partnership with local municipal governments. This bill would enable municipalities, with the approval, a vote of a local legislative body, to choose to provide a property tax exemption to child care facilities. This bill, if adopted locally, allows dollars saved via this exception to pay, say, their employees at a higher rate, to fund new positions, to move from a part-time to a full-time position in order to be competitive and make more spaces for children available. This bill, if adopted locally by a vote, this exception shall specify either a dollar amount of the assessed value to be exempt or a specific percentage of the assessed value that will be exempt, which may be, and this is covered in the bill, 25, 50, 75, or 100%, again, up to the local legislative body. This bill, if adopted locally, would be used for one or more purposes in addition to its use as a child daycare agency. The exemption shall apply proportionally. So if we're looking at an entire building and there is one part of it that is for the child care agency, then that would be the part that would be assessed for the exemption, not the entire building. And the updated, actually, amendment addresses that. And this child care center needs to be licensed in good standing with Department of Health and Human Services in accordance with RSA 170E. As you may already know, the state has lost 1,500 slots in child care coverage since the COVID-19 pandemic, leading to at least 21,000 children in New Hampshire who do not have access to child care because of lack of slots available. If a family cannot afford child care, the woman is more likely to leave the workforce. Before the pandemic, 85.5% of women ages 25 to 34 participated in the workforce. Today, it's 75%. That's a notable drop. We know that the child care industry is struggling across the country and, again, across our state, specifically around issues of hiring and retention. With the passage of SB 221, communities can assess their gaps caused by a lack of staff in the child care workforce. Now, some of you may have heard about Senate Bill 237, which is a comprehensive child care package that talks about adding more dollars to the Child Care Scholarship Fund, as well as going to an enrollment-based system versus attendance-based, and some other key points. But I happen to sit on Health and Human Services, and that's where we heard this bill. And I pulled some key points that I will share as I wrap up my testimony. So Del Champagne from the The Children Save the Children Action Network shared that they did a survey in New Hampshire in December of 2022 and found that 68% of New Hampshire families said that the child care crisis is a serious problem for them. Ms. Warden of the Coalition for Young Children and Families said their child care center in Coos County is closing after 33 years due to staffing shortages. And what I remember specifically about that testimony is that she talked about all the pictures on the wall of their child care center from the children that have been there over the years that then are now parents that have their children in there, and there are grandparents who have their children there. To see those doors close is a major blow to Coos County. And then Donna Hajar from the Learn Path Child Care Center said she used to employ 45 staff members, but recently sold her center in Derry, only able to keep her center in Salem open, and she now only has 23 employees. So these are just 3 of the many stories shared within these halls of late that highlight the issues that need action now. As I close today, I want to applaud the partnership between business and government that delivered this creative solution that adds yet another approach to addressing the child care crisis in New Hampshire. I consider this an all hands on deck. As a former city councilor and mayor of Lebanon, I understand the importance of enabling legislation, recognizing that one size does not fit all, and it's critical to let those who know their communities best choose solutions that can work for them. Thank you for your time, and I trust that you can support Senate Bill 221 with an auto pass. With an auto pass recommendation out of committee, that is what I'm hopeful for today. Okay, I feel like I'm on speed dating here. Just roll right through. Would you like me to cover the amendment, Senator Gray, or are you good?
You might as well cover the amendment.
Okay,
Before I
and-
start asking my tough questions. right?
Okay, and I have with me representatives from the Upper Valley Business Alliance and also the city manager in Lebanon, Sean Mulholland is here, and he was key in actually working on drafting this legislation with me. So some of the questions may be more appropriate for him down in the weeds to answer, but I will do my
He'll be
best.
the next one up after you.
Okay, perfect. So in looking at the amendment, what we did is added the dollar amount of the assessed value or percentage, that's a change, requiring the annual application for these centers and that they have, again, they have to be licensed and in good standing. It removes the current Section 5 that was in the original bill, and it does address the proportion of the building that would be, they would look at the whole building, and then the proportion that is the child care center is where the assessment would be made, either in the dollar or the percentage value. Well, that's where the assessment would be made, and then the landlord would receive that tax exemption and turn back to the child care center in terms of their rent or their lease payment to provide relief in that manner. So I will close with those comments. Again, I'm happy to answer what questions I can, but I may defer to City Manager Mulholland. Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Senator Perkins Walker.
Yeah, just a technical one. Senator, so we only have one page of your amendment, but I think, so what you're saying is that this replaces all Section 1. It removes the existing Section 5 in the bill. What about Section 6 and 7?
It lines right up. So if you just take that first page, when
Yeah.
it came back from OLS, it didn't have the full bill. It only gave me the page where they made the changes. So if you take that page 1 and lay it right on top, it will align right
So it
through.
removes all of, this replaces all of Section 1?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Question is, if the daycare is run by a nonprofit, it wouldn't be taxed in the first place, right?
That's
So
been removed,
we
though.
could do the same thing as this by encouraging church organizations and other things to actually operate the daycares?
I'm gonna, so we could, but I want to bring in the folks that have really examined this in terms of some of the not-for-profit and for-profit agencies that exist in the Upper Valley and throughout the state.
Okay,
Okay,
additional questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sean?
Thank you.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Sean Mulholland. I'm the city manager for the city of Lebanon. The city drafted this bill with the assistance of our attorneys and also working in cooperation with the New Hampshire Municipal Association and the New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration. I'll just answer the first question that Senator Gray asked. No, not all nonprofits receive a property tax exemption, only charitable organizations. So there are some that do, but there are a lot that do not. And they do not by right have the ability to apply for an exemption, only those that fit into that narrower category. And this would allow all nonprofits to be able to, all nonprofit child care facilities to be able to apply for that if it were approved and it was adopted by the local community. I won't go through all the written testimony that I have, it's bulleted on there, but obviously this is a huge issue in the Upper Valley, is across the state and across the entire country for that matter. Housing is number one and child care is number two, and both of those impact the workforce, the ability to get people into these jobs, especially the service jobs. Younger people tend to enter into the workforce at the lower level, not always, but for the most part they do. And that's where the biggest crunch is in our workforce in the Upper Valley. And again, it's a statewide issue, not just the city. It's also an equity issue. It impacts women more than it does men. There are over 2 million women in this country who presently cannot go back to work because they have to care for children because they have no adequate child care. They either can't afford it or they can't find it. Recruitment and retention, this again is a huge issue in the city. The city government itself, we have several employees that cannot return to work due to pregnancy. They have to care for their children. They can't find a child care provider. I've got 2 employees in that present situation, and it costs the city enormous amounts of money to train these people in the experience that they have, and now that we're losing them because they can't come back to work, that's a huge hit on the city. This is the development of human capital. This is enabling legislation. The municipalities don't have to do this. They can choose to do this or choose not to do that. They can also choose to adopt whether it's a 25% exemption, 50, or 75 or 100%. So they have options in which to do that at the local level. It's not mandatory by anybody to do this. Again, it applies to nonprofit and for-profit entities. As you know, we have a number of property tax exemptions for for-profit entities as well as nonprofit entities, those that fit the charitable categories in RSA 72, as well as there's a number against 79E, 79B, and there are other economic development for building new buildings and those sorts of things for private entities that receive property tax exemptions. So this fits within the same categories as the broad list of other exemptions that the state provides or allows municipalities to provide to their property owners. It was one of the pieces that was removed from there that would have allowed for a credit for those that are leasing property. We had to remove that because there's a constitutional issue on that. That's tantamount to an appropriation without the legislative body issuing an appropriation. So therefore, we had to remove that piece. So the amendment that you see did remove that. However, you'll see when UVBA comes up to testify, we have a number of child care providers that they have to pay the property taxes themselves. It's part of their lease agreement, and this will be a direct benefit to them. So that's a key piece of that. And just to kind of give you an example, if the city of Lebanon adopted 100% exemption for property taxes, that would mean a loss in revenue of $75,000 out of a $67 million tax levy. So the impact would be pretty insignificant. And that's for the 7 licensed child care providers that we have. Again, they have to be licensed child care providers. There are a number of child care providers who are not licensed. They do operate legally, but they're not required to have a license due to the number of children that they may be taking care of. This may encourage more people to become licensed, which is, again, another positive thing. But the city supports this. Obviously, that's why I'm here, to support the city council on this bill. This is just one of a number of efforts that we've put into place or that we're working on to solve the child care crisis. This is a small piece. The state government's done a lot already. The federal government's done a lot, but municipalities have not been given the opportunity to do something to address the child care issue, and this is one way in which we could do that. Again, if a municipality chooses to do that, they're not required to do that. It's up to the legislative body in a town or a city to be able to adopt this if they choose to, should this pass into law. If there's any questions? Oh, there's 2 other states that have a similar statute, Colorado and Ohio, by the way, that provide property tax exemptions for child care.
Questions from the committee? Senator Murphy?
Thank you. Is there any other sort of business that has this sort of exemption?
Not per se a particular business. There are, in the charitable category, those that meet that requirements, like over, I think in Exeter, a child care center has an exemption. But again, they meet it because it's under the educational provisions. So you have to meet those narrow requirements. So some get it and some don't presently. That's the problem. The other issue is certainly not 79E. I'm sure you're aware of that statute. Yeah, 79B for barns, historic barns, and new construction as well. There's an exemption that's allowed for by municipalities if the municipality adopts that exemption.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Your town could open up a daycare for its employees. Have you?
Actually, we're working on right now designing and building a facility, and that would be run by a nonprofit, but it wouldn't be specific to city employees.
But run by a nonprofit, so therefore it would be more than likely a charitable organization and therefore exempt.
No, Boys and Girls Club of Central New Hampshire is not exempt, and they would have to pay property taxes. So this facility, if this doesn't pass, they will have to pay property taxes on a city-owned piece of land because they are operating an entity that is not exempt. So they would have to pay for that.
But if the church organization operated that, then it would be exempt.
Right, they have a different category, yeah, under RSA 72.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much. Looks like Tracy. This way.
Oh, that way, sorry. I have some for sides. Good morning. Good morning, Senators. My name is Tracy Hutchins. I'm the director of the Upper Valley Business Alliance. We're a regional chamber of commerce that represents approximately 470 businesses and organizations in the Upper Valley. My testimony regarding SB 221 is also supported by 20 organizations and chambers of commerce. You'll find them listed. You'll notice that it includes White Mountain Attraction Association and Ski New Hampshire, as well as the Lakes Region Tourism Association. Obviously, Ski New Hampshire is a statewide organization that represents our ski industry. The lack of affordable and available childcare is affecting New Hampshire's already crisis stage staffing and workforce issues. Our service-oriented businesses in particular, such as retail, restaurants, tourism-related businesses, have been greatly affected by the lack of affordable childcare, causing workers to lose work or leave their jobs altogether. Childcare providers are also losing staff, as many cannot afford to pay their staff a market wage. Providers also know they cannot pass along the staff increases or salary increases to their clients because many of their clients would not be able to pay that. Due to the lack of staff and high overhead costs, many child care providers have closed, causing families to scramble to find places for their children, driving long distances for child care, or leaving the workforce altogether. Our businesses cannot afford to lose more workers, and our state's families deserve to have safe and affordable child care so they can work and be productive. As a Chamber of Commerce leader, I and my chamber colleagues, we work with many small businesses, and we know that the savings of just even a few $1,000s can mean the difference between a daycare center staying open from one year to the next. SB 221 could help child care facilities by lowering their overhead, freeing up funds to better pay their staff or hire more staff, or increase the number of children that they manage. As part of my testimony, I'm also submitting a letter from a child care provider in Lebanon, the Twin Rivers Child Center. Katie Tremblay, their director, is describing, she does rent their space, and she is describing what the impact of the taxes are. Their taxes are included in their lease. There's also a letter attached from one of their board members. Twin Rivers is a nonprofit organization. So I do hope that you will support this bill. Thank you.
Questions from the committee members? Senator Perkins Coker.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for being here. So I think one of the questions from one of our committee members was whether other industries have a similar tax credit. And so I just wanted to confirm, it sounds like what the chambers are saying and what your business alliance is saying is that this industry has sort of been singled out as a policy decision to sort of provide this local solution because of its importance to all of our other industries.
It's at a critical need. I have business members that are thinking of closing their businesses because they have young children and they cannot find someone to care for them. I have one in particular whose wife carries the insurance, and he has put his business on hold so that he can get another job because they cannot find somebody to take care of their 3 young children.
Just one follow-up, Chair, if I may.
Certainly.
And I think this kind of combines with, I know the cost of housing in the Upper Valley is something I've followed for a long time.
Yes.
Now, I think we frequently see that both parents really need to work to afford their housing.
Absolutely.
And so this issue has really changed over the course of our generation.
Yes.
To put parents in a pretty tough position. Is that your experience?
Yes, absolutely. Particularly in the service industries, if you have 2 parents that are working in service industries, almost all of their wages are going towards housing. And then you add inflation. I mean, we all know that, food, gas, everything that they need to be able to function has gone up, and the cost of childcare as well. And, we just lost another childcare in the Upper Valley that just recently closed due to a retirement. And already we were at critical mass. I have employees of members, up at Dartmouth Hitchcock, at Dartmouth College, who all say that, they're driving 40 minutes to go to a childcare and then 40 minutes back to their position. Mm-hmm. Or they're looking at leaving their jobs, or they're taking leaves of absences. This is not a new problem. This is a problem that's been growing. The pandemic made it worse, but it is something that has been around for a long time. It has just never been addressed.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jackie?
Good morning. How do you do? I'm Jackie Cowell from Early Learning, New Hampshire. So Chairman Gray and members of the committee, our organization is a nonprofit statewide group where we work with childcare programs of all shapes and sizes. They are nonprofits. They're also, we tend to call them privately owned versus for-profit, because typically there's not a lot of profit. You do the good work, but there's no one going home and vacationing in the Swiss Alps every year running a childcare program. So privately owned programs. And so on behalf of our organization, as well as there's a legislatively enacted group called the New Hampshire Child Care Advisory Council. They also support this bill and urge you to pass it. Any tool we can put in our toolbox to keep these programs viable, open, and continuing to open their doors to more and more working families, we would support. The childcare not only supports the workforce of today, it really helps prepare the workforce of tomorrow. You may not realize the math works on this, that a child whose mom and dad are working, commuting, dropping them off at the childcare, going to work and picking them back up 5 days a week, can spend more hours in childcare than they will before they enter the public school than they will their entire public school career, including recess. The math works. So during these formative years, being in childcare can be a great thing, helping them prepare for school. So we want to really make sure that these businesses have what they need, and this will be another great tool to help them. Thank you.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Lynn?
Good morning. Thank you for having us. My name is Lynn Willette. I am a director in Amherst of Nellie's Treehouse. I've been in the field of early childhood for 41 years. As a director, this is probably the worst I've ever seen it. I run a center that serves 69 children. We are currently at 64 children. The last 5 I cannot enroll due to staffing. I am 4 staff members shy. I have an 85 child waiting list. Some of those people have been on my waiting list for over a year. having the opportunity to have the property taxes exempted for us would allow us to offer our staff more money. It would offer us the ability to help some of our struggling parents who might need a little bit of help here and there, and would also allow us to hopefully attract and recruit and retrain some new staff for our program. You know, property taxes, when you have a playground in a large spot, can average over $10,000. And that's a lot of money to put back into our programs and to serve our families. We can't afford to raise rates to what the true cost of care would be without causing a real issue for parents not being able to afford care. We work very hard to make sure our families are being addressed. About a month ago, was I lost 2 staff members to go work in another industry for more pay. I had to contact infant parents to tell them that they could no longer start in my program in 2 weeks, which was devastating for them. They expected to be able to return to work. It's an ongoing theme we see and hear. And anything, especially the property tax situation, would help us to allow our staff to get a more livable wage, would help us to allow and hopefully increase our enrollment and bring in more care for our area, and we know that our parents need that. So I would strongly encourage you to consider this bill.
Okay, Trish, this is if there's anybody else on the sheet, are there any questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There was 2 people that signed up in support, and one of the state rep that didn't indicate whether he was talking or not. Okay. All right. Mr. McEachran.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman Gray and members of the committee. It's an honor to be here representing the City of Portsmouth, and thanks to Sue Prentice for putting this bill together. The City of Portsmouth is 100% in support of this bill. I think some of the workforce, you know, I remind people all the time to do that, and I forget that. So Daglin McEachran, Mayor of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The workforce issue has been certainly highlighted. It is no different in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I think COVID has exacerbated this just because folks are working at home. It's probably, you notice even more the fact that you do need childcare during that. In Portsmouth, we've done some, and we plan to do more. We acquired a parcel of land, community campus, that had the Seacoast Community School. As part of that purchase was a desire to keep the nonprofits that were working, one of those being a preschool and daycare, so that we could continue to exist and serve the community. One of the things that, you know, taking my mayor hat off for a second, as a dad to a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, you really understand how important childcare is. It would love if we could afford to live in our own homes without both parents working. Unfortunately, that is not the case for us, and so we rely on quality childcare. And one of our daughters got in, you know, she's 6 years old, and now she's in kindergarten. Our 2-year-old is grandfathered into the child care facility that she is because her big sister went there. And the waiting list that we see in Portsmouth is no different than the rest of the state. I'd like to make just one point, and I had the same questions as Senator Gray when this came before our legislative delegation. You know, why can't, you know, nonprofits, those that are exempt, you know, they're already not paying property tax. Why can't this continue in the way and incentivize people to be charitable exempt organizations? And it was pointed out to me that the child care provider that I had as a kid, and I'm forgetting her last name, but she was Hazel. She was an awesome lady. She lived down the street on Dennett Street, and I was dropped off and had child care at her house. she would have qualified for an exempt status there. And so, you know, it gets me thinking. In Portsmouth, you know, all of our issues are unique and throughout the state. This is enabling legislation. We could align the desire of those that want to provide childcare with those that want to stay in their homes and reduce their property tax burden. That's something that the city of Portsmouth would gladly do. And then certainly this is going to help all of the childcare facilities that we see here. But I see this as also helping, you know, some of the childcare happening within the neighborhoods itself and enabling more people to do good and necessary work, but also have the city be able to incentivize that work so that we can actually keep, you know, our seniors in their homes and providing a necessary service that we all rely upon in Portsmouth. Thank you.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Devon.
Chairman Gray, members of the committee, my name is Devin Quinn. I'm the Director of Policy for the New Hampshire Women's Foundation, where we invest in equality and opportunity for the women and girls of New Hampshire through grant-making, research, education, and advocacy. And we support SB 221 because it will provide relief to child care providers, to families, but especially women who need child care, and options for local leaders who are looking for opportunities to respond to the child care crisis. Certainly you heard that it's a child care crisis, and it certainly impacts women in particular. So not only are women a majority of this field, but they're most impacted by the lack of child care. During the pandemic, mothers were 4 times more likely to reduce hours or drop out of the workforce entirely than fathers were. That has led to nationally 1 million women out of the workforce, and certainly on the second page of this you can see how those numbers are here in New Hampshire for unemployment claims. Women became the majority of unemployment claims during the pandemic. Child affordability is also something we talk about. A lot of people will mention that child care for one infant costs up to 11% of a median income married couple family, but for a single woman, it's 55% of her median income, which is just purely unaffordable and really impacts local economies and who can be in the workforce. But another perspective I wanted to add was that the Women's Foundation runs a program called the Women Run program. It's the state's only nonpartisan program training and encouraging women to run for state and local office. And oftentimes we hear from women who are not really interested in politics, but they want to serve their community. They want to figure out how they can give back. They are mothers themselves. They have friends or family members who are struggling with childcare. They are business leaders, chamber members who are talking about the childcare crisis and how they can give back. And so this is a really unique opportunity for local leaders and women at the in individual communities to help make that decision for themselves, for their businesses and their local economies that would specifically help women and the families they're serving.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you. On the second sheet, there were 2 additional people who signed up, did not wish to speak. So anyone with last nickel? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and as soon as we're ready, we'll open up the next one. CACR 9. If you don't have one.
I have one now. I got that one from.
Oh, okay. You're all set, okay. We will open the public hearing on CACR 9, and ask the prime sponsor to introduce himself.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senator Darrell Abbas. I represent Senate District 22, which consists of the communities of Plastow, Atkinson, Salem, and Pelham. I'm here to introduce CACR 9, which is an honor to do. It's really to protect our tradition, which is our first in the nation primary for the presidential elections. If you look at New Hampshire from the outside looking in, and you talk to people throughout the country, when they think of New Hampshire, they think of the Live Free or Die motto. They think of our first in the nation primary and the old man in the mountain. And we've already lost the old man. So we lost one tradition, and now we're fighting to keep another one. And a wise person told me this. I won't say their name, but the first in the nation primary for 100 years, it's become a thing because New Hampshire made it a thing. We made it that. And it's for that reason, that's why it's celebrated in this state. And now it wants to be taken away from the state. And not because of any overt act by the state itself or by the people of New Hampshire. It's not that we did something wrong or we messed up our election results through negligence or any of that. It just wants to be taken away. And I hear the reasons why, and apparently it's not been something that's been shy about. And this isn't to blame a political party, because 10, 15 years from now, it could be a different party pushing to take it away. I think it's a bipartisan agreement that the first in the nation primary that was celebrated here in New Hampshire should remain here in New Hampshire. That's not a Republican or Democratic debate. But it puts us on the map. We have presidential debates here. We have all our hotels filled. All the diners are full. You have candidates touring and campaigning throughout the entire state in all major political parties. And that's something that if you go even in our gift shop here in the State House, you'll see campaign signs for all candidates for different parties. You see photographs going, spanning over the 100-year process, but you have more candidates that are currently in the race when you're going first. As you get towards Super Tuesday in the back end, there's less people and less candidates still in the race. So we take a tremendous amount of pride in doing that. You can be a candidate for the highest office in this country and not have a war chest and still be able to campaign throughout the entire state. And we saw a great example of that in the last election cycle in 2020, where you had candidates to perform very well in the primary despite not having all the resources available to campaign throughout the entire race. So that, I think, puts us in a very good position of being the first in the nation primary and maintaining that. But the reasons I'm hearing for taking it away from New Hampshire, and it's been apparently not shy about it at all, and it's because that the incumbent president feels is rearranging the order perhaps for political gain. And I wouldn't put that past a candidate in a different party in the future. I will say, in my humble opinion, that is the worst reason why we should change our primary to not be going first, because a candidate didn't perform well here in the primary, and they're seeking re-election. That's self-serving, and I don't think that is something that we should give into. And there's been several reports where a national political party is threatening members of the party that it would take away some of their delegates if they do not try to change the First Nation primary. And I find that to be, again, an overreach. That's a political organization. That is not, I don't believe that that should dictate how our elections are performed here in New Hampshire. We do them right in this state, and we'll continue to do them the right way. And one way to protect our first in the nation primary tradition would be to put it into our Constitution and give that tradition to the people. So if ever wants to be taken away, you wouldn't be the political parties can put all the pressure they want on the politicians, but it would belong to the people, not the politicians. I've also heard that some criticism of the state, that it claims that the state lacks diversity, and that would be a reason why they should take away our First Nation primary. I don't believe that's a very fair reason to do that, because one, the demographics is not something that we directly control. And I don't believe, if you look at the results of our elections, especially going back to the last 20 years, diverse candidates have performed very well in the state. So that where you may argue we lack diversity in one manner, the results of our elections do not reflect any type of prejudice. Great example would be President Barack Obama won the state twice. In 2018, in the congressional race in CD1, CD2, they're both Republican nominations for each district were candidates of color. So you see it happening, that it's not showing in the results that minority candidate can't perform well in the state. So that's I believe that's also an insult to the voters of the state to suggest that we wouldn't otherwise support minority candidates for that reason. So I would hope that I hope we can put this and all agree to let's preserve this tradition for the state. It's ours. Let's keep it ours, and let's continue to do it the right way. And I hope we support not to pass. And I'll answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. That is the last person that I have on the sign-in sheet, and I haven't seen anybody run up there since. So we will close the public hearing on CACR 9, and as soon as we're ready, we will open the next public hearing on CACR 10.
That was for CACR 9, true.
Oh, we had something for 9?
Yeah, but there was nobody signed up to speak except for Senator Atlas.
Oh.
It's just another name. Okay, so I'll take both of those.
All right. All I need is,
This next
10.
one, yeah, there's just nobody signed up to speak.
okay. I do nobody really well. Okay. We'll open the public hearing on CACR 10 and ask the prime sponsor to introduce herself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Donna Susi. I represent Senate District 18, comprised of the town of Litchfield and 5 wards in the city of Manchester. The CACR before you appears to have a lot of language, but it attempts to resolve what I think is a very simple problem. For many years, serving in the Senate, and even before in the House, people would always ask why, in particular on the Senate side, why do we meet for what equates to about 3 to 5 minutes on the Wednesday before the governor's inauguration? And the reason is because the Constitution says we have to. Not because there is any magic to it or any special thing that we do. What the Constitution provides is that we have to canvass the votes. And that was drafted and put into our Constitution at a time when there were horse and buggies, when ballots had to be delivered to Concord, when it took a considerable amount of time to ensure that the results were correct. Fast forward to 2023, and as I said, frequently ask the question, why are we here on Wednesday if we're coming back the next day for the governor's inauguration? So what this would do is essentially consolidate the process of the honorary canvassing of the votes to the Thursday, same day as the governor's inauguration. This would not preclude, I've been asked this question because the House likes to do some other business the day before the governor's inauguration. This would not preclude the House from meeting, or the Senate, should we choose, but it would eliminate that requirement so that you don't have the 2 days in a row. It would be for the convenience of legislators. It would save the taxpayers some money, and I think it's a modest change that's long overdue. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee members? I'll ask a question.
Okay.
Having been to 10 of these, the inauguration day, generally because of the guests of the governor, we usually wipe out between 30 and 40 seats over in the House. Oftentimes it is not well attended by the other body or the other political party, that it might be that you would have to have the session in the morning to canvass the votes and then maybe the afternoon. But it seems like that there is some logistics that the chiefs of staff from the House especially might be able to offer. Have we contacted any of the past chiefs of staff to see what they think about the bill?
The chief specifically, no. As you might recall, I'm a former chief of staff for the Senate, and I can tell you that back then we had the same issue, is that we're bringing people in for an extra day for what is basically something that literally lasts minutes. As I said, I'm not trying to preclude the meeting. Should either chamber choose to meet on the Wednesday, that's fine. This doesn't prevent them. This only eliminates the constitutional requirement to meet 2 days in a row.
Okay, any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
You
Chairman.
were the only ones signed up to speak. There's 2 others that signed up in support, but did not wish to speak. With that, we'll close the public hearing, and we will look for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
We have a motion by Senator Murphy, a second by Senator Perkins Quokka to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Seeing none, ayes have it. If you pass this down to... All right. As everybody knows, we need to get done with the FNs. You should all have in front of you bills to exec, starting at 132. We have a series of FNs there. So I would take them up in order.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yeah.
In respect to Senate Bill 132, I would like to make a motion about to pass, and I do have an amendment to offer.
Okay. Let me just get out my folder here.
And that is amendment number 2023-0553.
Okay, that is the one that is noted on our sheet. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second of ought to pass, and Senator Abbas also moves the amendment. Do I have a second on the amendment?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, now just explain some of the differences between the underlying bill and the amendment. First, if you go and look towards the end of the bill, the underlying bill would have actually, if you go to page 2, beginning on lines 30, there's the complaint process. The original draft would have permitted any person, which, essentially federal agents or state representatives, elected officials, to file complaints in that capacity. And I didn't believe that that was appropriate, just from a policy perspective, regardless of the issue of immigration, what this covers. If, we don't need immigration officers who are not just filing random complaints with the Attorney General's office. So it did strike those lines. It did also remove the definition of inmate, which I thought was important, because that didn't seem to really have any place in the original draft, never mind the amended version. But what I did is, when it came to sanctuary policy, the original bill had really detailed and had numbered paragraphs or lettered paragraphs of certain restrictions. This, I hope, would simplify the process. And basically what this does, and you heard about what happened in Exeter, where a person was helping the police translate when they respond to an incident, and this person just happened to be at a gas station, I believe, and it turned out that person's visa expired. And the police, the Exeter police then arrested that person. That's just how the facts are presented. This sanctuary policy wouldn't actually permit that. This would only apply when you're dealing with a suspect that's in lawful custody of the state already. And at that point in time, if the person's in lawful custody, they would have the option to decide whether they wish to honor or cooperate with the detainer request or not. It would be on a case-by-case basis. And, in my opinion, it gives the police the discretion on how they want to handle a situation. But it would not permit a policy where, as a matter of, you know, they would have to just ignore the request every single time. It takes away that discretion. I think from a public safety perspective, if you're dealing with extreme circumstances, you want to be able to address those. Having a sanctuary policy where they're not allowed to prevents that. And for better or for worse, the police, the exercise their discretion, they have to own up to that for better or for worse. And I think that we need to trust law enforcement to use their discretion wisely and appropriately in these circumstances. So I think this is a good policy for public safety concerns. It's not giving the police the authority to go out and arrest people under federal law. That's not what this is doing. This is not permitting that. It's not jeopardizing our state's sovereignty. I don't think we're not basically giving into the federal government in any means by that, but at the same time, creating these type of environments where you encourage people to willfully ignore the law, and then you make it so law enforcement can't cooperate or do anything on top of that. When you're dealing with this, in a certain circumstance, you can be dealing with someone who has several open crimes that are, you know, in and of themselves concerning. But if you have a policy, you have to ignore the detainer request, you would have to ignore it. So this at least allows the police to look at those circumstances and act appropriately. So I hope you support me in the ought to pass. At the very least, I hope you agree the amendment's better than the original draft if you don't support the ought to pass.
Additional questions, comments? Okay, we will, amendment 2023-0553S. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No. Opposed?
And I've got a vote of 3-2. We have the ought to pass as amended now. Is there additional comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
3-2. And Senator Abbas, you get to take it out.
I appreciate the respectful tone with which you approached your issue.
Next one on the list is 133. There is no amendment on this one. Certainly, I've spoken to lots of different people. If the committee is ready to exec this one, that's fine. If you want to do anything else with it, the chair of finance told me that he would waive finance on this bill since all it does is shift costs from one primary date to another primary date. And the training and other things as mentioned would be the same. So we'll have a little discussion and we'll take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I do appreciate your conversing with the Chair of Finance on this. I don't think you often disagree with each other, so.
Not usually.
I am absolutely supportive and have been consistently of changing the date of the primary. The one issue that I do have with this legislation is the runoff provision. I don't think that is necessary. I know you've probably spoken with Senator Birdsall. This was her legislation. As I said, I support the first part. It's the second part that gives me pause.
You're speaking of
On page 3,
lines 10 to 13.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm not blaming any political party for this, because I'm doing my best. One of the arguments I've heard in support of having it run off was, in the last election cycle, there was one party is supporting in a primary a candidate in another political party. The motivation for that, we can speculate as to why, but one of them, the belief is that that was done because they thought they were supporting the weaker candidate, hoping the weaker candidate would win the primary. This would hopefully, by having a provision like this, would prevent that from happening, at least minimize the instances where it happens, because you would have to have that 50% of the 50% figure. So you may be, if that's what's happening, they may be funding more than one primary. So it may reduce that from happening. We had some situations, we had mailers come from out of state that didn't even comply with New Hampshire law, and we were unable to really do much about that. Did that have an outcome on the primaries? I'm not sure, but it would prevent that from happening. Also, sometimes you have a very crowded field, and I've heard this happening not just in New Hampshire, but there's speculation that certain candidates run to offset votes from another. That's been happening probably since the beginning of elections. Again, it's not illegal to do that. Everyone has a right to run as long as they're qualified, but it may encourage less of that. So there's some benefits of doing it. It's just whether we think the 50% number is the right number or not.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I made my opinion on the bill pretty clear 2 weeks ago. So in its current form, I can't support it. I know that Senator Birdsall, I did speak to her about this bill 2 weeks ago, and she suggested she may have an amendment. And I know that she's had a couple of weeks already, but everyone's very busy, and we were on break last week. I would be okay as a courtesy to give her one additional week if it doesn't matter.
I did speak to Senator Birdsall yesterday, and she's not right now going to offer that amendment. Certainly that doesn't stop this committee from doing a committee amendment. It also doesn't stop anybody from doing a floor amendment, or when it gets to the House, if it does get to the House, to do something there. Senator Abbas. I'll get you next.
Although I support the runoff provision as well, I am strongly supportive of the primary, moving the primary, making it earlier. So I would hate to see this whole thing fail. So if there was an amendment and that's what it takes to get it to the next level, I would support the amendment reluctantly, but I would still do it because I think the primary issue, and I think if we agree on that, we should at least consider that, and I'll accept my defeat on the runoff.
Senator Perkins Coca.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to add my thoughts. I guess generally speaking, I think that the need for an earlier primary has been demonstrated. I think it serves the voters because, there are differences between our candidates from different parties that I think are meaningful, and it gives a longer time for our voters to see those differences and evaluate them if we have an earlier primary. I share Senator Susi's concerns about the runoff because I just haven't heard that to be an issue that has been raised, and I don't, if it was an issue we needed to solve, then I think we would have known about it before now, and it would have been an issue in existing primaries. So I would support removing the changes in Section 8 that we've discussed, lines 10 through 13, if there was support for that in this committee.
Senator Susi.
I would just agree with Senator Murphy that perhaps one last discussion with Senator Birdsall as to what her amendment would have done might yield some conclusion. I don't think anyone wants, speaking for myself, certainly don't want to see the bill die, and I think if there's a way for us to move forward, might not have that within our grasp at this
certainly, I think that moving the primary date is something that we need to do as early as possible. Having a runoff, since the elections that we're talking about wouldn't happen for almost 2 years, is less, important to me, in that removing it from the bill before we vote on it and pass on it would still allow that to be introduced as a separate bill or added to any of the other bills that we get back from the House. The way that I look at this section, it could be the whole Section 8, that would be removed in the committee amendment because it sees no other function. So the first thing is it sounds like we have a motion of ought to pass by, I'll make the motion of ought to pass. So, okay, and now it sounds like we have a motion for a committee amendment.
I would move committee amendment to delete all of the language on page 3 except the effective date.
Effectively removing Section 8 of the bill
Correct, lines 1 through 3.
and renumbering Section 9, Section 8.
Second. All right.
Senator Perkins Cuoco seconded.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
would you also be looking to delete sections 2 and 3? And modifying section 5? And section 6, I'm talking about where it has us doing things in February. I
Well-
personally feel very strongly that, as I said before, the election season is plenty long enough. I have no problem moving the primary date back a week or two, but sign-ups in February.
The reason that some of that was moved was to make it more closely aligned with town meeting and voting on town meeting. And so that I believe that the way these dates were put in here, that it would more or less be, concurrent with that filing period and stuff. So unless, somebody wants to move, some of those, I personally don't have a problem with the dates that are in there.
Mr. Chairman, I do think those dates are to mirror what are the time periods between the current primary and registration. My only concern with moving them is that we should consult the Secretary of State's office, just because they do need a certain period of time from sign up to prepare ballots, and there's always been a window for registration. So I think the bill was crafted to align, to keep with the existing time periods between the two. So if we move them, that could be an issue. So, maybe if we moved from the primary from May to June, then we could do February, then we could do March. But I think that window has to exist at least to a reasonable period of time to allow for preparation for the primary.
And I do believe that part of the discussion was around town meeting day, that, you needed to fit that in there also.
That
so that-
conversation did happen, yes.
So, for right now, we have an amendment which would remove Section 8, renumber Section 9 to Section 8. If we have another amendment after that, then we will entertain that. Everyone understand what the committee amendment is attempting to do? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 4-1. Okay, do you want to offer a second amendment to the committee amendment?
Mr. Chairman, for me to support the bill, I'd have to go through this thing with a red pen
And
and
that's-
delete a big chunk of it, and I'm not prepared to do that on the spot today.
Okay.
So I would support a modest move back of the primary date by a week or two, removing it to June and leaving signups in February. That's not something I can support, but that's me.
Yes, sir. Just so you know, the legislative history is we've tried twice to move it into August, and it has met defeat both times. So certainly going to June is not certainly my first choice, but I don't think I've got Senator Abbas. Hit your button if you would, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what's the issue with February? Because I understand the timeframe's consistent with what it is now. It's just we move one back 3 months, we got to move the sign-up hearing back. So,
Thank you. My objection, and I said it 2 weeks ago, but we may not have been in the same place at the same time. I just feel that the election season in this state is constant. We have biennial elections. Between town elections and city elections and the state elections, it's constant. And I think people look forward to a little bit of a break between campaigning. And now we're going to move it into February, and you're going to have an election season that's basically 10 months long. And I think that, I don't think the voters are going to be happy about that, and I don't think that was a reason that I was here. So I respectfully would request, or at least for my part, I would not support it.
An additional comment about the dates that we're talking about, moving the election into June, is there's 5 people that are sitting around this table. They're going to find it very difficult to go out and campaign and also do their Senate work at the same time. So that you're talking about the signups being over, and you really campaign season starting just about the time crossover is going to happen. And depending on how many bills the House sends over to us, that sometimes is a busier time of year, and then dealing with the budget at the same time. It shouldn't be that year. It should be the year after the budget. But all those financial things that are going to come across. So right now, it may not be, my first choice to move the primary into June, but if it's going to get moved soon, it's going to happen. So from what I'm hearing is that you're not going to offer another amendment, and that the next motion that we vote on ought to pass with the committee amendment. Is there further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
It's 4-1, and I guess I'll take that one out.
I think so, but that's how the process works.
Senator Gray, I don't know that we picked somebody to take 132 out.
Yes, Senator
did.
Abbas.
My apologies.
Maybe I didn't do it as forcefully as I should have, but he got the word.
You got it.
He got the word.
Right. She's the one that needs to.
Okay.
Okay.
Next FN is 155, school administrative unit budgets. Yep,
I have 514.
yep, that's the amendment. I did have a discussion with the people over in DRA, and they were commenting on the original bill at the time. When you look further back in the statute, it mirrored a lot of the things that was done later on. Gee, if you just knew somebody that could crochet you another loop, Anyway. they didn't have a problem with the way the bill is, and now the way Senator Avard in his amendment have changed it, it takes out a lot of that stuff. So before we take a motion, I want to see if there's any discussion on either the bill or how it would be if it were amended. Senator Perkins Cuoco.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I respectfully, I just really didn't see the need for this bill. There wasn't many people here in support, and I think if there were issues with our existing system, then we would hear about them. I appreciate the chair's work to make sure that the language works for DRA, but it just doesn't seem necessary to separate out the school budget vote, especially for the reasons enumerated. So I'm not intending to support either the bill or the amendment.
Any additional comments? For myself, what they're attempting to do, it appears, is to address school administrative units where there's 2 or more in the district and separate that from, single ones, and make sure that there is a public hearing going on, if not the regular budget process. Again, I look at the way it is with the amendment as a clarification. Also, since the way it's done, I certainly think that there was a reason why Senator Avard drafted the bill in the first place, and that the supporters, but I'm willing to listen to anything else anybody wants to say. Then I will take a motion. We know Senator Perkins Cuoco is going to offer a motion to ITL.
I'm going to move ITL.
I'll second.
So. Okay. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
No.
Senator Abbas?
No.
Okay, so that's a 2-3. So the alternate motion is a motion of ought to pass.
With amendment?
Well, first we do the ought to pass first. I will move ought to pass. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we have a motion on the amendment? I'll move the amendment.
Second.
Okay. And that is Amendment 0514S. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Opposed.
3-2. And so now the motion is ought to pass as amended. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Opposed.
3-2. And Senator Murphy, you haven't gotten one yet.
Sure.
$220. Yes, ma'am.
You might recall, I did provide an amendment The amendment sought to do two things. One, the bill in its original form, although the title said including pre-processing, it had been omitted in the draft, so the amendment does include language for pre-processing absentee ballots that have been mailed. But the other issue continues to be the term disability and how that is applied, given the language of the affidavit somebody has to fill out when they register and or request an absentee ballot. So what this sought to do was to limit the language to illness or to limit the language so that it was not a no excuse absentee, but rather a limited to illness or other medical condition or requesting absentee ballots. As I said, that's language very similar to what was used when we allowed for absentees to be utilized during the 2020 election cycle. It was very successful. We do have a number of people from the time that this language was put into our Constitution that view disability in a very different way. There are times when people would characterize themselves as ill or having a medical condition, but do not have what they would characterize as a disability because it's limited in scope or time. And for those reasons, I would hope that we could move in some way to amend the bill and move this issue forward. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee members? Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With what was passed in 2020, is this word for word similar, or any differences?
Word for word similar. It was the language that that's where I drew the language from when I presented it to OLS.
Well, I have a long-standing disagreement with the senator on some of these. Certainly, striking out the stuff on line 7 and 8, which does, go back to the Constitution, that, certainly I want every voter to vote in person, should they be able to. And on page 7, we cut back from 2 hours back to 1 hour on process and absentee ballots. Certainly, some of the senators may not know that it used to be that you didn't process absentee ballots until after the polls had closed. Okay, then we moved it back to noontime, and then we have moved it back to not 10 o'clock, but 2 hours after the polls open, so that if they open at 8, it's 10. If they open at 7, it's 9. And again, that shortens the amount of time that a voter who has gotten new information can go down and vote in person and not have his absentee ballot. Because as soon as they put the red AV next to the check, to the name on the checklist, they are considered to have voted and are not eligible to pull that, to have a regular ballot in their possession. So certainly for those reasons, during the COVID thing, we had a letter from the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, which talked about existing law and many of the things that Senator Sherman is the one that worked with a lot of this at the time, and that, in accordance with that letter, that a person who, because of the amount of way the disease was being transmitted, etc., there were a lot of doctors and medical people that were advising people not to go out into crowds, not to do. And so it was done on a temporary basis, knowing it was a temporary basis, knowing that there was, and so the provisions in here about pre-processing, I have long, standing on saying that the thing that pre-processing does for you is allows you to open up the envelopes, look at the signatures, and actually what they did that first year is they actually highlighted the checklist so that it was much easier for the people if they alphabetized the list or the ballots that they've gotten back, and it was in the same order as the checklist. They could go very quickly through it. There's actually, and always has been for all these years since we first did this with COVID, the ability to have the computer actually do the highlighting for you. But there are some things that are actually bolded on the checklist right now, that if you take an absentee ballot application, not whether you've returned it or not, there's a field that's bolded so that it's supposed to help you do that. And for all those reasons, and the things that we're doing about removing the outer envelope to begin with, I just can't support this. So, further comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may have said this, pretty sure I did, but in Salem, in 2020, I saw this provision abused by, or not applied properly. There's people that were openly, I don't bragging is the right word, but they were just open about how they voted absentee already under the reason that they were afraid of contracting COVID-19, and therefore it would be unsafe for them to, or whatever, to vote. But they spent the whole days at the election polls, the same individuals doing that. Now, did that have any outcome on the election results? I don't believe so. But when it says medical condition, that would apply to, that's pretty broad. In 2020, I understand the rationale for having this. It made sense, given the pandemic we're in, but I was the one, at the time, member of the House, asked, well, how do we get around Part 1, Article 11, that requires it to be a physical disability? And I couldn't get that answered. I wasn't on the election law committee, and I was the one that spoke against it for that reason, just pointing out that this is what, we have limitations on when we can do it, and I have absentee ballots, and perhaps a CACR in the future would change that, but I wouldn't. I'm just saying, as this is, having a medical condition, I don't think that's, I think that's too broad, and considering I observed this be, it's not quite no excuse absentee, it's close. And I think I believe it is. It's my humble opinion. I just think we're getting there. To have any medical condition to state that it prevents you from going somewhere, being able to vote, I think that's beyond a physical disability. So perhaps a change to Part 1 of Article 11 would be the solution to this problem, but I think this runs into a constitutional issue, but also a provision, when it was in prime time, I witnessed myself not be, people took advantage of it in the wrong manner. So I won't be supporting it.
Senator Perkins-Coker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. But, I'm glad we're able to have this discussion in a respectful way. I hear the points you're making, Senator and Senator Gray, and I would just like to offer a different perspective. I think this is an extremely modest expansion, and I think it's respectful of people making choices that reflect their own life. And I don't bring this up to make it too personal, but my mom, has faced some significant health challenges over the past couple of years, and so being inside the polls would be a different health risk for her than being outside. And I think we all share the desire for everyone to participate as much as they can in our civic life. And I know I spend all day at our polls on Election Day because I just think it's a lovely civic activity. But if you just can't do that if it puts you at risk. I mean, I don't think that's the intent of our law. So I respectfully hear the concerns, and I hear what you're raising about the pre-processing time as well, Chairman Gray. I think, again, allowing our election officials to make the decisions that are best for them. I mean, what we're really doing with these modifications is enabling our individuals across the state to administer their lives and their jobs most efficient and safe way they can. So I appreciate the perspectives offered, but I just wanted to share mine, and I would wholeheartedly support Senator Susi's amendment and this bill.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Second.
We have an ought to pass motion. Do you have a further motion?
Yes, but I did have one question. So I certainly would move the amendment, Mr. Chairman, and that is Amendment 2023-0615.
Yep.
But I do want to go to the concern that you raised on page 7. I certainly, on line 27, where it changes it to 1 hour, I certainly would be open to reverting back to the original law, which is 2 hours. I have no issue there. I believe the function of pre-processing is a dual function. It was supported by the Secretary of State when he testified. As we said, it does two things. One, it is making it a bit easier for those who've mailed in ballots, for the election officials in a public setting to process, to make it easier on the lines. But the other thing that it's doing is allowing the opportunity to cure. And people who don't vote absentee on a regular basis, who may be out of town, who choose to vote absentee in that election, don't always follow directions carefully. And this is an opportunity for the town or city clerk to, if they're pre-processed, to call the individual and say, you omitted a signature. And because I've sponsored previous legislation that allows people to voluntarily give either a telephone number or an email address, they can be contacted quickly and their ballot can be cured. And it's a good opportunity for citizens to, who have attempted to exercise their right to vote, to have their vote properly counted. So, I am open, as I said, to that change on page 7. I would be open to other changes if we could just move forward with pre-processing. I'm certainly not abandoning my point of view, but I also understand where other members are coming from that have voiced concern about the definition of physical disability, which I think, although enshrined in our Constitution, is a real slap in the face for anyone who has another form of disability, as I've said before, a mental disability, or a health condition that they do not classify as a physical disability. For someone to have to make the choice between being inaccurate on their affidavit and actually casting their ballot, I don't think was ever the intent of the Constitution. So happy to.
Just a second. Senator Susi moves amendment 2023-0615S with the additional amendment that on page 7 of the amendment in line 27, that the cross out for 1 hour and replacing 2 hours with 1 hour would be changed. Have I stated that correctly, Senator?
Correct.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? Senator Abbas.
If I could ask a question. So if this became the law, I understand, and this was mentioned last time, that if someone feels that someone signed this affidavit and was not honest about their reason why they voted absentee, you can challenge the ballot. I'm just thinking in my head, the process one would have to go to challenge someone who has a medical condition. I guess my point is, how would one even do that? I know what they would do. They would call in, challenge it, I get it, but on what basis? It kind of, when I say it's making it no excuse, it kind of puts you in a position where it's really difficult for anyone to challenge that person's representation in their affidavit. How would you do it? I understand when it's a physical disability, it may appear obvious, and I don't mean any disrespect to anyone with pre-existing health conditions. It's
More
just,
than-
a
more than-
CACR, I think, is the answer to the problem as opposed.
More than likely, what you would do in that case, if you did submit a challenge there, the moderator would be, use the criteria more likely than not that your challenge is accepted, but he's probably not going to rule against the person voting, and your option would be to call the hotline at the Attorney General's office. So, you know, that's, and the thing is that for this pre-processing, I didn't find it in there right away, but the last one contained that you could only challenge at the pre-processing meeting, whether that was Sunday or whatever, so.
But Mr. Chairman, my point is, just a fact pattern, how is someone going to even know to challenge it? I kind of put you in a position where if someone cites a medical condition, you might not, it might make it virtually, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it makes it.
Again, Senator, I didn't support the bill to begin with, so I'm the poor one to answer your question.
If I may, Mr.
All
Chairman,
right, then
attempt
we'll get to
at just
Senator
answering
Murphy
Senator
right after.
Abbas's question first. So if you look at the language on page 6, line 4, it would add illness or other medical condition. I think challenging whether or not somebody has a disability currently, as you said, whether it manifests physically or not, oftentimes it doesn't, and you would have the same problem today in an election to challenge it. I have been a challenger on several occasions over the years, going back way longer than I'm willing to admit. But it's typically for the reason of being out of town or unavailable that I've seen challenges. Rarely is there a challenge made for someone's medical condition. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but procedurally I would agree with the chair. The moderator would make a determination, and then the immediate appeal would be to the Attorney General. And that's the way it currently happens right now if you were to challenge somebody with a disability.
And the point that I'm making, when it's a physical disability, it's very clear, you know, someone at least can explain the foundation, most of the time, not all the time. I'll agree with you on that, but if you're saying that you're challenging the fact that they have an illness or medical condition, that's not a physical disability. I'm just pointing out that I don't believe the person, that's it. It seems kind of, to me, it seems like it's a situation where there's really not a practical scenario where one could effectively challenge that if they wanted to. And then it also, you create an environment where people are raising an issue, someone has to defend their position on something, and it kind of puts people in an awkward position. I'm just pointing that out. I think it's a tough application.
Senator Murphy?
Thank you. I've been sitting here listening to everybody talk about it. I want to understand the issue very well. And I really didn't know which way I'd come down on the bill. And what I see here is two separate issues, right? There's the issue of adding illness and other medical condition and pre-processing. And I have to concur with Senator Susi that I don't think that part one of this bill is very different than what is currently happening. I mean, I've volunteered as an election worker. I really don't think I can imagine a moderator saying, upholding a challenge to a voter, an absentee ballot, because somebody suffers from agoraphobia, for example. So I do find Senator Gray's comments about the second part of the bill pretty compelling. So if you were looking to get my support on the bill, if you drop the second part of it, I would support the first part.
Could I just ask a clarifying question? You say
Yes,
drop
ma'am.
the second, so you would drop the pre-processing language? Is that, I just want to make sure I understand this.
Well, we're talking about amending an amendment.
Correct, which we've already done.
Yes, yes.
Right.
So if we're moving back to the original language,
In section
2-hour language, I think we can support that. I'd like to hear what Senator Gray has to say about it. I frankly give him a lot of weight because of his experience as a moderator.
I believe that the amendment is better than the bill. And if I vote for the amendment, you should not expect that I will vote for the bill even as amended. But it is less objectionable, you know, as amended.
Amen. Just like Senator Bill Marbury.
Okay.
Okay, so we have,
Can I just ask one further question?
absolutely,
Senator
Senator.
Murphy, I just want to
Oh,
go back.
boy.
I'm just trying to, if you wanted to separate out pre-processing from the beginning part, I would suggest, if that is your intention, to eliminate the pre-processing part. It begins on page 7, line 24. Those sections all relate to pre-processing of the absentee ballots. And everything before that is changing the language to include illness or other medical conditions. Either way, I'm just trying to understand and obviously seek your support
Okay,
on the parts that you are in agreement with. If it's
And some of your changes, Senator Susie, were to conform with Senator Gray's bill, correct? Or were those removed in this amendment? On the outer envelope?
On the pre-processing, it is my opinion that there's nothing in the law that precludes them from highlighting a checklist however they want to do it. Okay, if I'm putting marks on it, then that's a totally different thing. And certainly neither this bill, I believe, nor the previous law that we had during COVID allowed anybody to put the red AV on there or anything else that would indicate, you know, crossing off the name or whatever, that also indicates that the person has voted. So that doing away with the outer envelope actually improves your ability to help have someone cure, because if they dropped off the envelope and you or stick it in the mail and they open it and it's the day before they go to Florida, they do have the ability to cure, whereas if you waited till the Sunday before the election, they may be gone. But right now, I have an amendment offered by Senator Susie, and a small modification to that on page 7. Do I have any other amendment language? Okay, seeing none. The amendment to 0615 plus the small change on page 7, line 27. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Okay, so that's a 4-1. And now we have the bill as amended. Further discussion?
Senator Gray,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to understand your objection to the remaining bill, please.
The language that we have right now supports the way the Constitution is and the way it's stated. I have challenged others in the past to bring to me an occurrence where someone who has a legitimate reason that they can't come to the polls to cite that. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we had people, mothers caring for their children. If the husband is off at work, we added that to there. If they cannot get to the polls because of work, whether that work is paid or whether it is a mother caring for her children, we added that in there. We added a couple of other things. And right now, if you look back to that letter I referred to before from the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, using the existing law before the changes were made for COVID, it was their opinion that the people who, because of COVID, were not going to go to the polls, were covered by the existing law. And so I believe that the existing law does take care of those people. And so I think that it's nice that Senator Susie, keeps on, trying to make the modifications to further her cause, but I don't support it.
So what I'm hearing you say, and I don't want to speak for you, but I just want to make sure I understand your point of view, is that there's no need for the bill because it's already practice and at every election place in the state, or
In state law, when
they're already covered.
they are covered.
Thank you.
Senator Susie.
Just one last thing, Senator. I would refer you, oh, sorry, I would refer you to, so this is the registration part, but it's quicker to find. On page 2, line 24, right now the current law says that, so if you look at 18, I, fill in your name, do hereby swear or affirm under penalties for voting fraud set forth below the following. Line 24, that I am unable by reason of physical disability. That's the stumbling block for many people, is that you're asking them to swear that they have a physical disability when in point of fact, they have an illness that may be temporary, that doesn't in any way physically manifest itself. I completely agree with what Senator Gray said, that legally that is accommodated, but I don't think that the average person who goes into their city or town clerk to fill out the form, or who gets the form and goes to, is necessarily aware, and for that reason may not view their condition as being categorized as a physical disability.
And while you were talking, I pulled up Merriam-Webster, okay? And the definition one, physical, mental, cognitive, or developmental condition that impairs and interferes with or limits a person's ability to engage in certain tasks or actions or participate in typical daily activities and interactions. And if I use that as the definition of disability, then I don't see where adding, the illness, medical condition, which are all, that interferes with my ability to take certain actions, okay? And that's, for better or worse, that's the way I have always interpreted it, and that's why I feel pretty confident that there's not a whole lot of people that are going to come to me and say, I'm not covered for this, because I don't think there are any. Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, Part 1, Article 11 says physical disability. So again, I think, can't emphasize that one enough, but when you're dealing with, I think, the broad language of a medical condition, I don't see a practical way for that to actually be challenged. And for that reason, although this is perhaps an unintended consequence, this isn't expressly stating early voting, but you have an expanded absentee voting structure where you don't really have any way to, at least a practical way to enforce it. So for that reason, it's not called early voting, but it's pretty close when you have when someone can cite an illness, and if you don't have any way of challenging or saying, well, what's the illness? It's all speculation by the person challenging it, unless you know the person specifically, and which wouldn't be appropriate, I believe, to just be blurting out, this person's not ill, this person doesn't have a medical condition. So, again, how does this going to operate? It just expands the absentee ballots beyond what's permitted in the Constitution to a point where you can't really enforce it. So it's not early voting, but to me, it kind of is.
Senator Perkins Polka had her hand up, and then I think that we are getting back to repeating things that
I
we
think
said
it's
before.
probably time to vote, yes.
So unless there's somebody that really has to after you, we're gonna vote.
Yes, yes, sir. And respectfully, I just wanted to support what Senator Susi said in terms of physical disability. I've had personal experience with voters who are confused by the affidavit because, it says physical disability. And so just to present some scenarios which might meet this expanded definition, someone might have COVID, someone might have cancer, someone might have leukemia, someone might be pregnant. Like, there are several illnesses or other medical conditions that would not meet the definition of physical disability, and yet would be reasons that someone is immunocompromised or otherwise not able to enter an indoor environment. So I'm not trying to say that we should expand this to everyone. That's not what the language of this does. It is a modest expansion that accommodates people's individual situations. And, respectfully, I've said this several times in our last session to Senator Gray, I very much believe people want to fill these things out honestly. I think that when people sign an affidavit, they take it incredibly seriously, and that's what I believe about human nature. And so we're putting them in a tough position, and they just want to participate in our civic process. So I will leave it at that, having added my voice to this discussion.
Okay, seeing no further discussion. All those in favor of ought to pass as amended, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay? Nay?
No.
That's a 2-3. Do I have a motion for ITL? Chair moves ITL. Further discussion?
Second.
Seconded by Senator Abbas. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed, my
3-2.
apologies.
And I will also take that one up. Okay.
Senator Gray, do you want to talk about anything else while we're here? I think
I-
we can dispose of 89 very quickly.
I want to talk about as many as you guys will let me.
Okay.
I'm going to try to let you out between 11:30 and 11:45 at the latest. All right, so you want to do 89? Is that what I heard?
Yes, sir. I would move all to pass with amendment 0630.
All right, first of all, you're just going to move ought to pass,
Yeah.
all right? And second, I'll second it. And a further motion, you move amendment 0630S. And I'll also second that. Discussion.
I can speak to the amendment if you like.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The bill as drafted basically made it meaningless and amounted to a repeal of the existing statute. Worked with Senator Perkins Quokka to come up with the amendment, which adds the words documented before medical reason. It remains a mandate. They shall accommodate the parties by meeting in person or electronically with the parties. What I heard basically was that the town clerks or city clerks did not want to be forced to meet with these parties and come up with scenarios that people basically were inventing reasons to force them to meet at their homes. But I asked the question, how often does this happen? And he said, almost never, essentially. So the amendment retains the requirement that they must accommodate the parties, but it addresses the situations, the fear, founded or unfounded, that the medical reasons are not legitimate.
Okay, further discussion, Senator Perkins Quokka.
I would just say, I support this amendment, and I think the test, pardon me, the testimony we heard from the clerks about their concerns about meeting electronically, they did have some ideas on how to accommodate that. So Senator Murphy and I just thought having more options was better than less options.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment 0630S, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And do we have further discussion on ought to pass as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do we have a motion for consent? We have a motion from Senator Susie for consent,
Second.
and a second from Senator Perkins Coco. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And it is on consent from Senator Perkins Coco, since Senator Murphy's already got a bill.
You
get
got
this
it.
one.
Least I can do.
Okay. 78.
Okay, 78.
These are the amendments that we talked about in that bill, that we added on line 19, the concept of remaining cost, that the way someone may have accomplished some portion of the work may have increased the cost of something else that we're doing or whatever, so that it adds that concept, so that when you are paying them or decreasing the surety or paying them out of your account if you're keeping the actual cash, that you also do get to look at it. Maybe the cost of asphalt went up quite a bit and they still have a lot of asphalt work to do, so that would also impact the remaining work. I think the engineering stuff was already in there. And then over on the other page, we changed it from 10 days to 20 days. Oh, the engineering cost, we added the words similar,
Similar.
other similar reasons. And that was so that, that we just didn't have the, and so those are the three changes. Do I have a motion?
Ought to pass.
Second.
OTP, seconded by Senator Perkins Coca. And I'll move the amendment to 0637S.
Second.
And Senator Perkins Coca seconds it. Further discussion?
Just to say that I appreciate your changes to accommodate, I know I mentioned Portsmouth has a very busy inspection department, so I think this will allow for more accommodation on the local level, but I think it's a great bill.
Okay, further discussion? Not seeing any. The amendment, 0637S, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion ought to pass as amended. Do I have any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. And since we didn't,
Second.
we have a consent from Senator Susie and Perkins Coca. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And Senator Susie, you haven't gotten the bill yet.
Oh, boy.
You're just trying to. 84. Absolutely. We will be in recess for 30 seconds or whatever we need. Senate Bill 84. Had a lot of requests to change the provision in RSA 1449 that talked about committees and commissions.
Yeah.
I went pretty much back to what it originally had said, added in the 15 members, and then talked about commissions afterward with just very few changes. Having a commission that's got, the possibility of having no more than 7 people representing the various organizations. This is a replace all. It takes away Senator Prentice's original bill. It was easier to do it that way. And she had no strenuous objection to it. I think her words were, whatever you need to do. So, comments?
Mr. Chair, I would move ought to pass on the underlying bill, and I do think the amendment is warranted. I think we've found ourselves a couple times with some really
Okay, Senator
challenging
Susie
study
moves
committees.
ought to pass, seconded by, I'll second it. And she also moves amendment 0723S.
I have 0333.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Further comments?
Mr. Chairman, just a clarification. The amendment does retain the commission.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
The commission is the second
Section.
section 2, and it has to, the way that the statute read before, and it's preserved, is that if you put it into chapter law, it is a committee, and if you put it into the RSAs, it is a commission. Most people, including myself, always thought that if you only had legislative members, that it was a committee, and that if you put it, anyone else on, then you change it into a commission. Well, that kind of preserves that in here too. You could actually have a committee, and it would only be legislative people, but you could also have a commission that only had legislators on it, but that's not normally what's done. So, further comments? All right, we have a motion to accept Amendment 0723S. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And the bill as amended, OTPA. All further discussion? Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The testimony really maybe was, kind of went beyond the scope of what the study commission would do. But I'm just looking at, there's a lot of commissions out there. I'm just,
The study committee is gone. This is a replace all.
oh, it's a replace all, so there's no,
Replace all.
I'll withdraw my comments.
Okay. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of ought to pass as amended, say aye.
Aye.
And seeing we didn't have any opposition, we have a motion for consent.
Second.
All those in favor of consent, say aye. Aye. And I'll take that one out.
It looks to me like like the commission's still there, but maybe I'm missing it.
You go to
Do
the
you have
amendment.
the right amendment? Because I had the wrong amendment.
Oh, maybe I looked at the wrong amendment.
Yes, 723.
Line 5 of the new amendment says amend the bill by replacing all after the enacting clause.
I see, thank you. We have two amendments.
Yep.
In binders.
I just want to put one more time.
I'll give the senator time to see if he wants to move reconsideration.
Okay.
This is good. I like
Nope.
it.
Okay.
No such thing needed.
Okay. Next folder I've got here is 111.
Gray is.
Consent ones, you know, I'll take those.
Very brave.
111. This is my bill.
All right, Senator Perkins Quokka,
Yes.
I'm sure you want to talk to us about,
Sure. So SB 111, just as a reminder, was a bill, the intent of which is to clarify that town councils have the same authority as city councils, which was granted under RSA 49C. The one objection we heard was from the Secretary of State and from New Hampshire Municipal Association to make sure that town clerks can still be elected regardless of the clarification we're making to town council powers. And so Secretary of State drafted some language, Senator Gray put it in an amendment for us.
Senator Perkins Quokka moves ought to pass.
Second.
Senator Susie seconds. And Senator Perkins Quokka, I think,
It's your
offers
amendment.
amendment 0644S.
I'm happy to offer your amendment, sure.
Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor of amendment 0644S, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Ought to pass as amended. Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent?
So moved.
Second.
Murphy, Perkins, Quokka. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. I'll take it out if you'd like, Chair.
Senator Perkins Quokka has volunteered.
Oh, there's 89. Could not find it before.
Bills we heard today, 271.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
could I ask if we could hold off on the ones that I was not here for earlier today? If that's all right.
Certainly.
They're not FNs, so.
And you got here during CACR 9.
I was here for all of them.
Are you ready for that one?
Could we hold that as well? Do 271 is the.
Sure.
I think the only other one we had was 224.
Yeah,
Well-
we have 10 and 22.
224, I have a note that says that a certain person to your left is working on an amendment. Oh, and you have it.
I do have it. That said, it may make sense to hold it as well, but I'll let you guys take a look at it.
Thank you.
I do have a copy, thank you, yeah.
Okay, we will hold that one.
That makes sense.
We're gonna hold 224, okay,
Yeah.
no problem.
CACR 10. I guess, you know, other than what I talked about, you know, when I asked the question, that because of the way it is, and, you know, certainly the chiefs of staff getting together could alleviate that by having one, you know, convening at 10 o'clock in the morning and the other convening at, you know, whatever. But if you have a contentious Secretary of State election or treasurer election, that happens, I guess that happens on Organization Day.
Exactly, and that's what,
So-
I have to tell you, it did take us several attempts to get this drafted, because it kept getting confused. So
Yeah.
it's very clear, I make no changes to Organization Day. That happens in December, that's when we elect our officers, that's when we come to joint convention to elect our constitutional officers, Secretary of State and Treasurer. I don't want to change any of that. That's very important. And once we are organized, as I said, if the House chose to meet the day before the governor's inauguration, they could do so. But literally, the only constitutional function that we have that day is to canvass the votes for governor. I dare say that in the last, 30 years of my experience, it's literally 3 minutes. And
pro forma.
if the House has other business to do, since we've already organized, the House could meet on Wednesday. I'm not trying to stop. What I'm trying to do is eliminate the requirement of meeting both days.
Senator Evans, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just thinking about what we did in January on the Wednesday and Thursday, could we have done that on one day? Was that really one day's work spread over two? I think, is that the point my friend from Manchester was making? Because I think if that's the case, it would be more efficient to do it on the Thursday, and obviously having the option to still do it on the House to meet or the Senate to meet on the Wednesday if they had additional business that was unforeseen. I mean, think of I know my last term in the House, we had to elect a new speaker on the first day, so.
As a senator, it has less effect on you because you get a reserved seat in the front row. What happens though, when the governor comes in, and depending on, you know, how many people the governor wants to invite, they just keep on eating up rows as you go back, so you're displacing the House members, you know, for the inauguration speech. And again, I don't think it's anything that's unsurmountable. It's just that would be a fact of life. Is there anybody that wants to wait on this one? Seeing no one, then I'm sure that I've got a motion of ought to pass from Senator Susie.
Second.
And seconded by Perkins Coca. All in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Second?
Do you really want to put that on consent? You don't want to talk about it?
Okay.
Well, I don't think you can put it on
Yeah, it was
consent,
in-
because you got, it's ACR, so you have to, and
I think you technically could.
how are you going to say you get a 2/3 vote? I mean, even with a voice vote, you can say, well, yeah, I heard.
I mean, in theory, consent is unanimous, right?
And Senator Susie, you get that one.
Thank you.
Good roll call the consent calendar.
Oh,
All shades of Steve Allen.
tough, that'd be tough. I don't know that I've ever seen Steve do that, but,
I remember once he pulled every
We're
bill
a
off the
team.
consent.
well,
Every single one. Just to prove a point.
I remember hearing all of his, I remember
He was
hearing
loved and
all of his stories.
simultaneously.
Stories about the traffic and how many cars were passing him, and that's why he was going to raise the speed limit. Okay, anybody else have anything they want to talk about in executive session? We have a motion to come out of executive session, and we have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed. We are out of executive session. Our business of the day being complete, we are adjourned.
9 bills.
I have to admit, I miss that guy.
Well, His death came as a surprise to me.
He was the only member I've ever seen move reconsideration
And then voted against.
legitimately change minds and win.
Are any of you on the committee for, I guess, judiciary? Neither of you are on there. You're on judiciary. I rewrote an amendment for. No. Huh? Yeah.